Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl and Gary, very much. And thank you for Arlington Neighborhood Village for having me here today. I'm glad to be spending this morning, yes, dreary morning, but hopefully we can make it a little more meaningful and if not pleasant this morning. So Gary had asked me to just introduce myself a little more. So I am an Arlington-based clinical psychologist, therapist, have been practicing in Arlington for about 20 years, and have been a psychologist for about 30 years. And my initial career path was academia. I was a full-time professor at George Mason. That's what brought me to this area after I got my PhD from Temple University in Philadelphia. And then, I was an academic full-time and was doing part-time private practice for a while. And then eventually realized that, what brings purpose and meaning to my life, what lights me up is sitting across a person or a couple of people for psychotherapy. And that, seemed to be much better spend time than writing academic articles that, as we joke, 3.5 people are going to read. So I ended up switching to full-time practice and have been practicing in Arlington for all these years. So I almost feel like I'm a half citizen of Arlington. I do live across the river in DC. Kind of like that's how I keep my professional and private life separate, but have gotten really to love the inner suburb of Arlington, and most of my clients, do come from there or nearby. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to have a chance to talk to all of you. So I am a therapist. I specialize in more in a type of therapy rather in type of problems. I specialize in, broadly speaking, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, something you might have heard. It's a relatively focused problem solving, concrete, science-based, evidence-based kind of approach, somewhat opposite from what still seems to be portrayed very often in TV shows, a client lying on a couch and talking about all the wrong things that happened to them in their childhood, right? Kind of what is of course Freudian psychoanalysis. In reality, of course, it's not that dichotomous. It's not like in reality, most of us are either Freudian analysts or CBT therapists. I mean, most of us are integrative in the end of the day, but we have it usually, and I think it's good to have a home base. So CBT is my home base, and another huge interest of mine is existential philosophy and psychotherapy. So I always say I practice CBT with an existential slant, and so with that in mind, I've talked a lot and written a lot. I write pretty regularly for Washington Post, but also other publications about major existential issues facing all of us humans, and sort of the human condition. And I think that during holidays, it's a time when those come very much in the forefront, right? And a lot of people end up struggling, even though it's ostensibly the most joyful of the most merry time of the year. I found that to be not just an overstatement, but I think an unhelpful proclamation, because for a lot of people, it's not that. Most often it's a mixture of emotions, and for some people it's a really, really tough struggle, and I see that in my practice every day. So I think this is a very pertinent topic. I think a couple of years ago I wrote about holiday stress and negative emotions that show up for the Post. And so this is great to have opportunity to talk about it. So I have prepared slides, not extensive, because I find when there's too many slides, and too much on each slide, that it's hard kind of to focus on listening to a person talking and watching slides. So I'm just gonna have it as a sort of a bit of a background to orient us, and to maybe help you kind of have a pictorial representation of what I'm talking about. And please feel free to put your comments in chat, questions. I'd be happy to, stop, pause between slides, between topics to answer your questions and to engage in a bit of a conversation. After all, it's a coffee and conversation, and so I'd be happy to do that. So no need to wait until the end of the presentation to ask questions or offer commentary. So the best way to find me, if any of you would like to find me at any point, is my website. It's just drkpsychology.com. So because again, my name is hard to pronounce, so that's how I became Dr. K. And as I realized, you don't want to have too many barriers when potential clients and patients call you, you want to, make it easier for them. So that's how I became Dr. K. By the way, my name was pronounced Jelena Kecmanovic. By the way, for context, I am from ex-Yugoslavia, from Sarajevo, and came here though 30 years ago, but the accent sticks with you. In psychology, we know that if you come after age of 12 or 13, you're kind of stuck with the accent. So here we go. Okay, so the most joyful time of the year, as we exposed to these messages everywhere, right? On TV, relentlessly, positive smiling videos, pictures everywhere, ads everywhere of people gathered with all the smiling family members, everybody's enjoying hot cocoa or cider or eggnog, and wonderful music is playing in the background, and it's a fireplace, and it's all joy and happiness and mirth and excitement, right? And of course, everybody is fabulously rich and lives in these great houses and so forth. So okay, fine. I mean, that's the sort of the product of a marketing machine, I guess, right? That we all been accustomed to, and yet one might think, well, yes, we've seen that for as long as we've lived, right, in this country, but does it still bother people? And I think maybe a bit of a surprising answer is yes. I mean, that's again what I hear from my clients. And by the way, I'm going to use term clients and patients interchangeably. So that's why I hear from my clients during this time of the year again and again. The typical comment will be, well, I know this is just commercials, this is just cheesy holiday movies, this is just ads on the on the buses I'm driving by by the bus. I know it's fake, and for most people it's not all joy and merriment, and yet I can't help feel really bad, because that's not my life, that's not my situation, that's not how I feel. So those matter, the messages, the societal messages everywhere around us matter, and I don't think they're going to change anytime soon. And I think it's really helpful for us, first of all, to appreciate that for most people, I would say great majority of people, holidays come with mixed emotions. Yes, often a lot of positive emotions, but almost always also negative emotions, what we call typically negative emotions, right? What are those? Well, grief is a big one. But besides grief, loneliness, sadness, having difficulty enjoying things, irritability, frustration, anger even, and sense of hopelessness. So all of that is pretty common during this time of year. And in our chat, prior to beginning an official part of this presentation today, Cheryl and me were talking about how I have learned this over the years, how much there's need during this time of year. Actually, the need for therapists really skyrockets in the time between like mid-November to about Valentine's Day, I would say. It is by far the highest need for therapists. And I have a pretty decent data before I came back to solo practice. I ran a group practice. We had 20 therapists in my practice. So we had, big, stream of, clients coming in, and I started tracking this, and it was like clockwork. It's really the need goes, up, which tells you that this is actually a really stressful time of year. So I've gotten to habit, if I can, to actually work. I work on each day, even 24th, the Christmas Eve. I skip 25th, but then I work on 26th, and I work also, not Thanksgiving, but everything around it. And I know I'm always full on those days, right? So this is a real thing. So why a holiday is such a mixed bag, right? Why do they bring such a mixed bag of emotions? Well, I would say number one, number two, closely tied for first place, loneliness and grief, right? So it's depicted again, the holiday are depicted as this time of togetherness and families coming together. And in a country like ours, a huge country, where families typically are very scattered geographically, right? Much more so than, where I grew up in Southern Europe, traditional societies, where, still your, extended families going back generations might be just a couple of miles, away from you. But in our country, here, right, the families, extended families especially, are typically very scattered. And the idea is that this, one or two times a year, everybody comes together. And it always puzzles me that somehow we have an expectation, then everything is going to go great. Well, it's not, you have two kind of issues with this. On one hand, you have people who don't have big families, who might not have children and grandchildren and relatives and close friends with whom to celebrate holidays, and they feel very, very profoundly left out and alone. And loneliness, of course, it's an epidemic, as a Surgeon General has proclaimed that very much of an epidemic in our society currently. And that feels even lonelier during the holidays when everybody seems to be gathering, right, with their families. And then on the other side, people who have, family and extended family and so forth that gathers this, one, two times a year, has a whole nother stress of these are folks you sometimes don't talk to much, and if you do, it's very sporadic, and now everybody's together, sometimes under the same roof, and there's a stress of kind of coming together in cooking, coming together in enjoying your time together, deciding what to watch on TV and so forth. And people have different needs and wants and expectations and preferences. And it's all kind of, mixed in one place, and it's hard. And there's a lot of drama, right? And, of course, add to that the current political divisions in society, and you have a recipe for very explosive times. So I see both, right? I see people really profoundly feeling lonely, either currently, or I had a client yesterday who was talking about, family that she doesn't have her own kids or grandkids. And, she is going to visit her sibling, and they have kids and grandkids. And then she was saying, so this year, I think it's going to be okay, but it really, she then like broke down, and she started talking about how she can kind of envision for the years coming up. She said, but my siblings, they all now oriented toward their families and their children, their grandchildren, then they live far away. And I can see that, like, they'll have that, but me and my husband, we're just going to be alone. We're just going to be alone. And I'm really afraid, she's in her late 60s. I'm really going to, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I could see us just really being alone, and it really, really, really got to her. So grief is another big thing, of course, and that is the reason why is that we know, right, from lived experience, as well as from psychological literature, right, that grief comes on in strong waves during anniversaries, and also during times like holidays, right? Where we, you know, we remember, hopefully fondly, deceased family members, and you know, they might have been at the holiday table a year ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and they're not here now. And it's that loss, that absence is felt, of course, much more acutely during holidays. So grief is I would say almost always part of the mix, because you know, it's hard to be over a certain age, right? And not have suffered loss and grief in your life. So and the older we get, the more grief accumulates. So definitely, you know, acknowledging that, making space for that, and just accepting that that is going to be part of the celebration. And then we have this, you know, what I call social comparison, striving to for perfection. But that goes back to this kind of, you know, striving for this idealized, you know, perfect dinner and perfect Christmas or Hanukkah, you know, meal, or, you know, perfect, you know, sense that everybody is entertained and happy, and their, you know, their needs have been met, and everybody's feeling great and all of that. And it's just really unrealistic. We actually, there's something really interesting in social science, in psychology, actually, a finding that we are really humans. We are terrible affective forecasters, is a term. We like to make up terms in psychology to you know, label different phenomena. So what does that mean? That we are very bad at predicting how we're going to feel in certain situations. So whether positive or negative situations. So as we sort of anticipating situations, we, you know, for these kind of situations, holidays, we tend to overestimate how, you know, how great we're going to feel, right? And then we're just kind of generally bad at predicting. And also, you know, let's remember that there's only so much that we can do to affect our emotional you know, experience in a given situation. There's only so much we can do. You know, as I'm often heard saying to my clients, one thing we can actually control is our behavior, our actions. That's the only thing of the three parts of psyche: behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. The only thing we can actually control is behavior. Thoughts, we have some, you know, indirect control over, and the feelings we really don't have a control over, right? So this idea that you know, we have these expectations that everybody is going to feel certain way, or that we're going to feel certain way, is very counterproductive, because first, it's, you know, almost never a reality, and second, there's no way to make us, you know, ourselves or others, definitely not others, even less so, feel X, Y, and Z, right? And you know, as I say, you know, if we could you know, wave a magic wand and feel this way or that way, you know, just because we want to feel that way, I wouldn't have my job, right? So okay, so financial stress is another reality, right? In today's society, and in our town, that's a very expensive town. Financial stress is felt by a lot of people, and it's just more acutely felt during the holidays for obvious reasons, right? The pressure, also this unrelenting pressure to give more and more and more and more and bigger gifts, is a strain for a lot of people. And then also to, you know, to have a house full of everything for the meals and so forth. Something also, just kind of as a side, but I think important, it's important to mention that also holidays happen to fall, these holidays, during the darkest time of the year, right? The coldest, well, one of the coldest times of year, but the darkest time of the year, right? And end of December, we have the shortest day. And seasonal affective disorder, you know, for abbreviation, with the apt abbreviation of SAD, is a mood disorder, right? It's a depressive disorder that affects people primarily during winter, right? And it's, you know, while a lot of people think it's related to cold, it's not. It's actually related specifically to shortened daylight, and shortened. It's not just shortened amount of daylight, but humans obviously tend to go outside much less when it is colder and yucky like today. So so just being exposed to less light, natural light, is generally bad for people. And a lot of people, I would say, maybe even, I don't know, is it majority, but a lot of people I know, like majority of my clients, will say that they feel worse during these dark months, right? And end of November, December, January, February. And it's only a small percentage of people who actually suffer from a more severe form of that, which we call seasonal affective disorder. So we'll cover that just very briefly afterwards. Just to be aware that if it's huge amount of sadness and inability to enjoy anything is really showing up during this time, it might be due to sad. And finally, disruption of routine during holidays is on one hand, it's exciting, right? It's something novel. It's good to disrupt routine from time to time, or your routines. And yet, we do know that if we do it too much, right? If we lean too much into over drinking, undersleeping or oversleeping, overeating, not keeping up with our exercise regime, not getting exposed to light and so forth. So any of these, health related routines that keep us kind of going and keep us regulated, if that's disrupted too much, we're gonna be more vulnerable to experience negative emotions during this time. How common is holiday stress?
Dr. K, we do
Yes,
have a question that's
yes.
come in. On your previous slide, you talked about grief coming around during the holidays, and somebody wanted to ask, is there a way to relieve some of the weight of accumulated grief over the years?
Yes, relieved. What we say, it's a truism in psychology. We say that, there is no way to skip over grief, right? And that we can only kind of go move through grief. And another thing that we say is that, grief never completely resolves. This idea that we, go through it and we come on the other side of a tunnel, let's say, that's not an apt metaphor, because, in my experience, experiencing grief myself and working with a lot of patients who struggle with grief, a tenor of grief can change. The way we experience grief can change. The acute sort of severity can change. Frequency of the waves of grief waves can change, but it's always with us, right? If that person mattered to us, I think it's unrealistic and really maybe not even desirable to really kind of put that behind us and kind of move to a place where we don't feel sadness and all the other emotions that come with grief, um, about having lost that person. That said, one of the most effective ways we have found to help people going through grief, especially during times when grief is bound to hit us big time, is to express your feelings in some way, right? Not bottle it up, not try to push them away. I mean, that's maybe the number one thing, with grief, as well as any other negative emotions, as we call undesirable emotions, instead of making them undesirable, really making space for them. I mean, that's easily, of course, more easily said than done, but realizing that it's part of tapestry of life, and that also, wanting not to feel grief and all these other negative emotions that come and thoughts, right? Pushing it away, not wanting them, running away from them, avoiding them, distracting yourself mercilessly, right? The second, like, oh, I don't want to feel that. Let me distract myself with myriad of distractions, of course, that are, at our fingertips these days. Not only that, it doesn't help us kind of, feel those emotions in a productive way and move through grief, but also it does these avoidance strategies that do not work. They are, I mean, Carl Jung, Swiss psychiatrist who was writing at this point 100 years ago, famously said, what you resist persists. So I would say, it's my mantra, when I talk to my clients, what you resist persists. The more you push it away, the more you find it or perceive it and judge it to be unacceptable and not okay and not, okay to feel along the side with positive emotions, the more it's going to come back to haunt you with vengeance. It's going to come back like a boomerang. So what you resist persists and gets worse. So, really, opening up and realizing that actually mixed emotions, what we call mixed emotions, which is combination of positive and negative emotions, is actually more common emotional state than pure emotions. And that I think something is so lost in contemporary, popular culture, popular psychology, right? Is like, well, what are you feeling, right? What are you feeling is usually maybe there's a primary emotion, but I would ask, like, what is there? Okay, there's grief. Like, let's make space for grief. What else is there? There can be grief and joy and sadness and excitement, and it can all be there, and making really space for that, and then expressing it in whatever way you find most purposeful, meaningful. Writing, I mean, journaling, people, will often scoff like, oh, journaling, but it doesn't have to be regular journaling, doesn't have to be certain format. Just, if you like writing, write about it. Write bullet points. If you don't find narrative writing, helpful, or something that you feel it's a chore. If you like writing, if you like narrative writing, if you haven't written anything, more like a creative nonfiction or memoir, since you were a kid, do it, now. Pick up a pen. I love the idea of, I'm very old fashioned. So, I always have a pen and a paper, do it. Write down your dreams in the morning, because grief will show in dreams as well. If that's not your thing, paint, make something, do a collage, tend to your garden in a creative way. Anything that is an expression of you and your personality and your emotions that you can kind of creatively put in the world. Sing, make music, anything that will kind of that can express the whole tapestry of the emotional experience.
Okay, thank you.
So let's go to the next slide. So how common is holiday stress? I mean, I just wanted to put a little bit of data here. This is a recent survey, and said that, basically more than a third of US adults found holidays somewhat stressful, and then 14% very stressful. And then NAMI, which is a National Alliance of Mentally Ill survey, it's an old survey, but things probably haven't changed really in this realm. There's no reason to expect that they'll change, is that more than half of people who actually already struggling with a mental illness, reported their holidays actually make their conditions worse, which is really interesting. Okay, so typical struggles during the holiday season. I've already talked about this: stress, kind of ubiquitous stress, sadness, irritability, frustration, excessive drinking, very common, which tends to exacerbate anxiety and depression, something that I've observed again and again and again during many years of my practice. There's some, empirical evidence for this as well, that for people prone to anxiety and depression, drinking in the moment can feel a little better. Obviously, we've all been there. And yet next morning, even separately from hangover, let's say you don't drink, to excess to feel hungover next day, but I think I would say at least 2/3 of people prone to depression, anxiety, they will feel worse emotionally next morning. They will feel that the anxiety has worsened and depression has worsened. So really being careful about that. Being exhausted, being fatigued is of course typical during this time. Difficulty concentrating, anxiety, fears, and headaches. Okay, and then, as I said, important to also recognize if there's, more extreme, let's call them, feelings of sadness, especially profound sadness, hopelessness, irritability, and maybe most crucial, inability to feel any pleasure. The term we use is called anhedonia, means that it's the things that you used to enjoy, that used to bring you some sense of happiness or pleasure, of hedonistic kind of feelings, they just don't do anything for you right now, right? And if that's really prevalent and really stable, that's when I get really concerned. Even more than sadness, actually. This inability to feel pleasure is actually a kind of more important indicator of more clinically significant either seasonal affective disorder or clinical depression, major depressive disorder. So then another type of depressive symptomatology that you see specifically in the seasonal affective disorder is overeating, oversleeping, and especially really craving carbs, and eat, most people then do indulge them because that's the only thing that maybe not makes them feel good, but it at least makes it a little more bearable to get through the day. Difficulty with focus and concentrating, sometimes memory issues, difficulty making decisions, even sometimes small everyday decisions like what to wear, feeling really, really fatigued, really sluggish, like moving through a fog, often my clients say, and then social withdrawal. So if this is starting to show up every day for most of the day for at least a week or two, then I would say definitely that would be an indication to seek professional help, from either a therapist, right? Psychotherapy can be helpful for that, as well as biological interventions for actually seasonal affective disorder. We know that those lamps, I'm sure you all heard of the lamps that provide, artificial light, but you can, while you're working at home or doing anything, you can have a lamp. The special lamps, they do work. You have to use them as directed, and for enough enough time every day, and it's more effective in the morning, but they do work. They do in Scandinavian countries where the seasonal affective disorder is more common, as you can imagine. That those lamps have become actually quite often utilized, and they're helpful. And of course, in the end, they're also medications like antidepressants. Okay, so if we take that kind of seasonal affective disorder and put it on the side, and if we go back to just talking about kind of much more common, much more frequent holiday stress, holiday blues, sadness, irritability, anxiety, fatigue. The question is, what can we do about it? There are, of course, many different strategies and techniques that can be useful, and these days our ability to access different recommendations is, of course, higher than ever in the history of mankind. So this is not going to be an exhaustive list. I mean, there are resources that you can find, in 3 seconds on the web, about what to do about this. So I'm just going to, talk about a couple of my favorites that, that just informed by my both academic work, but even more so my clinical work, right? My working with people, with patients, with clients over the last couple of decades, things that I have found most effective, most meaningful, most long-lasting. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of chat about a couple of those. So I would say, whenever possible, and this is of course where Arlington Neighborhood Village comes in very much, is connect with living things. So I purposefully didn't say just humans, preferably humans, sure, but pets, if you have yours, great. If you don't, go somewhere where there are pets, dog parks, shelters, wonderful. The pets actually have tremendously positive influence on our well-being and mental health. And this is coming from somebody who grew up in an apartment in Europe and never had pets. Like when I wanted to have I think a little cat. I wanted to have a little cat when I was a kid. My dad said, "Oh no, no, dogs and cats, they can't live in apartments. That's torture." And so, I did not grow up with pets. Nobody I knew had pets. And so I'm a little afraid of dogs, and I'm not very, comfortable with pets. That said, over the decades of doing this job, I've come to appreciate so much how much pets can really help people and regulate us and have us bring a feeling of purpose of taking care of somebody and having to walk them if they're dogs, and just provide that comfort and tactile pleasure. So I would say, let's not forget animals, and of course then, thirdly, it's plants. So if you're a person who loves going to nature, who lives connecting with the wild nature, great. But even if it's a couple of plants, even if it's a little garden that you still have, spending time gardening, spending time in nature, there's huge amount of evidence in my field that it can be helpful psychologically, huge amount. And again, I see it every day. That's one of my to-go strategies. I live close to Rockaway Park in DC, and so I'm probably 3 times a week there hiking in a one of the biggest urban parks in the country. So connecting with people, of course, whenever possible. And I would say then think about other living things, not just people, especially if it's harder to find people to connect with. And yet again, there are more opportunities probably than we realize. And this organization is a perfect example how, there are a lot of possibilities, and I absolutely can appreciate, because I've been there, and I know, how many of my clients have been there. You sign up for something and you have this intention and you want to go to this gathering, to this holiday lunch, to this happy hour. And then, the time comes and it's cold and it's rainy and you just, you feel yucky and you feel stressed and you feel sad, and you just can't get yourself to go. And what I've seen again and again and again is sometimes we literally, if we just force ourselves to show up, almost always will appreciate it and will feel better afterwards, right? So even if everything, as I say, everything in your mind is screaming, I can't do it, I don't want to do it, it's too much, it's one thing too much, it's like adding to my plate, and I already have too much on my plate. That's often a feeling, right? My plate is full, I can't, add another obligation. And yet it's worth actually, quote unquote, forcing yourself and saying, you know what, my mind can scream I can't do it, and you can still put one foot in front of the other. Remember when I said we can control behavior? That's the only thing you can control. You can control behavior. You can put one foot in front of the other. Go talk to people. If you're shy, if you're a little socially anxious on a shy side, find the person in the room who seems even shyer than you and go talk to them. They'll feel great, and they'll be relieved from their misery, and you'll feel good. So even for introverts, even for people who are not huge social butterflies, and I fall into that category, social engagement is crucial, it's important, and having both meaningful, deep connections is important, as is having what we call in psychology weak ties. And these are the people, this is your barista in a coffee shop that you go to, and now maybe know their name, hopefully you've asked their name, and you say hi, and you have kind of just an everyday chat, right? And these are maybe people from the Arlington Village that you don't know well, but you've seen them a couple times at the events, and you check in with them, and you catch up, and we sometimes poo-poo that as like, well, that's surface level connections, and is this it's a chit chat and it doesn't mean anything. It actually does. It still makes us feel like we belong, like we're part of a broader human community. And again, science of psychology shows weak ties absolutely matter. They're actually quite important. And that's something, of course, during the pandemic we lost completely, and which has added to the terrible psychological consequences of the pandemic. So I cannot emphasize this enough. Connect with all living things, or any living things. temper your expectations. That goes back to having these unrealistic expectations, so even having specific expectations that this is going to feel certain way, this is going to be certain way. It's hard to let go of expectations. It's very hard to let go of control, and remembering that all you can do is you can focus on your behavior, how you're going to behave, how you're going to behave, how you're going to act toward yourself and toward the other people in your life, right? Hopefully these behaviors are going to be expression of who you want to be in the world, who you want to be as a friend and a mother and a grandmother and an uncle and a neighbor, a coworker, and acquaintance, who you want to be, what matters to you, how you want to show up as any of these roles, and then aligning your behavior with that. That's all we can control. How we feel, what thoughts are going through our mind, how the other person or other people behave, feel, or think, not under control. And it can be very liberating when you really kind of internalize that mindset and realize, there's okay, this is what I can control, and I'm not going to kill myself trying also to do too much, right? Because of course that always backfires. I've always done this humongous, dinner with, 500 dishes. Well, yeah, I've always done it. Doesn't mean I have to do it this year. Maybe 50 will do this year, or 5. So really, really letting go of idealized, perfectionistic, expectations or goals or hopes, right? For something to turn out in a certain way in terms of holiday celebrations. Okay, this goes hand in hand with imperfection. I think striving. My clients sometimes roll their eyes when I say that, but like strive for imperfection, like really try really hard, because that's where the beauty lies. My one of my favorite lines from Leonard Cohen's, who was, I think, in my mind, even better poet than he was a singer, says that, that's, you know, uh, uh, I'm paraphrasing very much, right? It's we should strive for imperfection. That's where the human beauty lies, right? Everything is a little broken, and that's where the beauty and humanity lies, right? So let's strive for imperfection. That's what makes us interesting. As I say, people never bond over how great everything is. People bond over the sorrows, the grief, the struggles, as Jung would say, the shadows, the sort of the parts of themselves that they are ashamed of. That's what people bond over. When they open up about their warts and imperfections, that's when they connect over common humanity. Avoid overcommitting and disrupting your routine too much. Well, overcommitting I already spoke to, but disrupting your routine too much. I mean, too much is, I think, worth emphasizing, right? It's going to be disrupted for most of us to some extent, and that's okay. We sometimes need disruptions. We need, to be jolted sort of a little bit in shaken out of our, maybe too rigid routines, but like anything else, it's a Goldilocks principle, not too much, not too much. If we start, really not paying attention to the pillars of sleep and exercise and rest and so forth, that's going to catch up with us. Make space for grief and mixed emotions, like I talked about, and I'm going to talk about a little more in the next slide. And finally, it's a platitude. It's not a platitude, but it's now been almost repeated so often, in popular psychology spaces, that it has become a platitude, and that's unfortunate. This idea of practicing gratitude, right? If I hear, somebody else say, "Oh, just practice gratitude, have gratitude journal and practice mindfulness," I'm like, "Oh goodness, okay." So, but what's sad about it is that actually gratitude and mindfulness, they work. They really, really work. But I think we have to kind of get away with this almost like, oh my God, and roll our eyes, gratitude. I have a way of expressing this that I like. It comes a little bit from a Buddhist philosophy that the happiness comes from learning to want what you have. So happiness comes from learning to want what you have, right? That's gratitude, right? Of realizing, so, of looking at, just for even for a little bit at the glass half full, right? It's not just what I'm lacking, what I don't have, what I've lost, right? It's not just the absence. Let's look around and let's look what I still have, however little, what I still have, what I still have. Frankel, who was a psychiatrist who was in Auschwitz during the Second World War, right, said that even in situations where everything is taken away from you, right? I mean, he was in Auschwitz for a while, he survived, and actually wrote a book, one of, I think, best books ever written in a history of psychology, Man's Search for Meaning, and developed existential psychotherapy called logotherapy based on his experiences during the Second World War. He said, even when all choice seems to have been stripped away from you and everything is stripped away, you still can choose an attitude that you have that day, and even the smallest action that you can have. He had a very good escape plan that he had made with a couple of other prisoners in Auschwitz. And on the morning of, he decided not to go because he was a trained physician. And he said, one thing I've been able to do while here in the concentration camp is to help out, my prison mates who were sick, in anything that could. And, that has provided enough meaning that I'm still alive and I need to stay here and do that, right? So even in situations where everything seemingly is taken from us, there's still you can still choose an attitude toward the world, and you can choose, and it can be an attitude of gratitude, and you can choose your actions, right?
Dr. K, we're about 8 minutes to 11.
Okay. Okay. Do I have, if there are questions, let me answer questions if there are questions, and then we can, we can go into this. I'm almost at the end. Yes, I'm almost at the end.
Well, one question is, the holiday blues disappear after the holidays?
Good question. I think it is usually a bit of a relief. I do find that people feel a bit of relief maybe after New Year's, right? Although of course then there's another unrelenting pressure to live up to your New Year's resolutions in January. So we transition into a different thing. But I think significant parts of it do cease to exist after the holidays. That doesn't mean that the stuff that has been stirred up during the holidays, maybe grief, maybe the difficult holiday interactions, family strife, fights, that's probably going to linger. That's going to linger either intrapersonally for you, that you're going to struggle with and process and talk to your therapist about for weeks to come, and sometimes over emails and Zoom calls with family members and so forth. So definitely it can linger in some ways. And this idea that this is a hard time of year just because we have less light and it's colder and people are less likely to go out and socialize and spend time outside exercising, that's going to just kind of make this time of year, including January, February, March, harder in terms of psychological health.
On a more practical note, what insurance do you take?
I wish the answer would be many, but I am out of network. We could spend a whole another hour talking about the dysfunctional nature of our medical and insurance healthcare system, and especially for mental health care. So the situation is such that in big cities like DC, most of doctoral level psychologists have opted out of taking insurance directly, which means that I don't bill insurance. That said, my clients, most of them, not all, but most of them submit my receipts. I call them sort of insurance ready receipts, to that, that have all the information the insurance needs to reimburse them. So if you have an insurance plan that is either PPO or sometimes called open access, if they have an out of network plan, they will reimburse for a portion of my fee. Not the whole fee, because they're again very unrealistic about market prices, but a portion. It can be a decent portion of the fee. And I do also have some sliding scale slots at any given time. Sometimes they're full for people in financial need.
Okay, and I think that's it for questions at this point.
Okay, so I will go on with this. This is we have all the wheel. Yes, so really two more slides. This is the part where, the previous slide I mentioned, making space for grief and mixed emotion. I spoke to that even earlier in the presentation, right? This idea of not pushing away difficult emotions, not avoiding, not running away from, not minimizing, which is of course really, really hard to do. And yet, we know from practical clinical work and from enormous amount of science that finding a way, even little by little, to actually let these hard emotions, physical sensations, emotions are really physical sensations usually, right, and some thoughts in your mind, to finding a way to let them coexist, invite them to the table, let them coexist with all the other kind of feelings in your body, in your mind, right? One way, I work with clients on this is actually using, sometimes we use this so-called emotion wheel. You can find it on the internet everywhere, where it's actually, which is really interesting, being able to label emotions, to recognize the different emotions you might be feeling at any given time, and putting a label to them, giving them a name, naming emotions, and also being able to better differentiate. So not just saying I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm joyful, as you can see in this, but really, okay, angry divides in, well, are you hostile? Are you aggressive? Are you jealous? Are you bitter? Right? So actually being able to granulate, to be granular about this, to differentiate emotions, actually that helps with with your emotional health, and helps with with ability to have emotions, to open up to the emotions. And then that in turn means that, those negative emotions are not stuck in the overdrive, and you're not going to be suffering longer term with depression, anxiety, and it helps with your emotional well-being and mental health. So another, again, I said mindfulness is way overused these days, and it's become a trite sort of exclamation, be mindful. I find a little mindful, if you want, if you were exercise of grounding yourself with 5 senses, you can do it anywhere, anytime, in your shower, doing makeup, walking, playing with your dog, just kind of going through your 5 senses and asking yourself what each of those senses are feeling right now in the moment. And then again, like, the Geico commercial, what do I feel now? What am I touching now? What am I touching now? What am I hearing now? What am I hearing now? Right? And it really helps ground you and kind of get you out of your mind, out of those ruminative, obsessive loops that we get stuck in, which of course are ruinous for our mental health. Express emotions constructively. This is the way creative part comes in that I was talking about. Increase self-compassion. So don't criticize yourself for not feeling how you're supposed to feel, right? An old cognitive psychotherapist, Albert Ellis from New York, in a thick New York accent, always used to tell to his patients, you're shooting all over yourself. You need to stop shooting over yourself, because we have so many shoots, right? We've internalized, I should be feeling a certain way. I should be.
An exciting day for families.
And instead of that, try self-compassion. Try to say, like, where did all these shoots come from? What would happen? Just what would happen? Let's experiment. If I were to actually engage in some self-compassion and say, okay, well, this is not ideal, and you're feeling all kinds of things, and you haven't acted in the most compassionate way towards somebody else, and you feel kind of guilty about it, and you regret some decisions. And what if I just kind of gave myself a pause for once? What would that feel like, and what would that lead to? And engage in positive reminiscence is actually very actively remembering good things from the past by watching, your old albums, videos, scrapbooks from your trips. It's a very good thing to do, especially during the holidays. And I will end with that. The final slide here is something that actually is a part of the book that I'm working on, and even kind of maybe I won't say subtype of therapy, because there are way too many subtypes of therapy out there, but something that I've been really kind of deepening my understanding of and my work with, and that is this existential part of therapy. And really all the you know, as they say, all the roads lead to Rome. All the roads in dealing with the existential givens, the hard existential givens of human existence, all the roads really lead to finding transcendence, right? Finding a way to transcend ourselves, to go beyond ourselves, whether it's being with others, alive or dead, spirituality, religion, nature, or creativity and legacy projects. So any more questions?
Not really. We've got a couple of comments talking about grief again. Somebody said just allowing themselves to cry about the things that they're grieving is often a big help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The crying is an interesting thing. So many people come to my office where, if you have any stereotype of a therapist office, there, the tissues right there, right? So we expect people to cry. And yet I would say 9 out of 10 clients who especially if they're new clients working with me, if they tear up or if they start even sobbing, right? They'll apologize. They say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it's really interesting how conditioned we are, right? That's not okay, that we shouldn't be doing that, even in therapist office, right? And I said, this is if there's any place for it, this is the place for it, right? And so I think it's absolutely curative. I'm a huge crier. My husband says that, like, 99 over 100 movies, however happy the movies are, I cry. And I mostly actually don't like happy movies. So, so that I'm very, very big proponent of crying.
All right. You talked about Leonard Cohen earlier. Liz posted the quote, "That's where the light comes in."
Right. That's
Which,
right. That's right. That
and,
is yes. All the broken bits, that's how the light comes through. Yes, exactly.
and somebody followed up on that with sometimes the imperfect things are what we remember most and allow us to find the laughter and the fun in things that we've been through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it is, it is interesting because, with this, again, this such strong sense of that a lot of people have, that I have to be, I have, this term, I have to have it together. And I always ask people, do you think that other people have it together? Oh, yeah. Like, people have it together. And I said, no, nobody has it together, right? Nobody has it together. And just, if you sort of let yourself be and connect with other people around the imperfections, I mean, that's the beauty of life, right? Otherwise we'd be robots. I mean, we would be one of these AI, chat boxes which apparently are going to replace therapists. We'll see. But
Now, something that we just got a comment in here about, faking laughter or smiling. I've read that really does boost your emotions. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a famous experiment, psychological experiment, done about 20 years ago, where they had people, with some mild to moderate depression. So, they were depressed, and they had a group of people and a control group, right, as we do in, psychology experiments. And they had people in treatment group, quote unquote treatment group, every morning go in front of the mirror and just kind of put a smile, even Mona Lisa smile, right? But if they can't, even, bigger smile. You don't even have to, like, laugh per se, but just smile in front of a mirror for 15 minutes. And they did this for 20 days in a row. That the results, I mean, of course, I wouldn't be talking about it if the results were not significant, but people felt better. People felt better. We actually now have a pretty good science about this, that, the muscles, all of our body, but really most importantly, muscles in our face are related. There's a feedback loop from the muscles to the brain. So, smiling sends a message basically to the brain that, oh, you must be happy in a way, right? And we do feel better. I mean, it's generally related to this idea that we can control our behavior, and smiling, maybe not laughing per se, but smiling is a behavior. And that if you can, engage in a behavior again and again and again that is helpful, it does feedback, and then you start to feel and think differently. And that is absolutely true. I mean, that's a concept in behavioralism, kind of fundamental concept is CBT therapy in behavioralism is, changing behaviors changes how you think and feel. We know, I mean, incidentally, it's the two physicians in this area. One was a Georgetown psychiatrist, Rosenthal, and Eric Finzi is a dermatologist from this area. About 20 years ago, the dermatologist noticed that his clients who got Botox, middle-aged to older female clients who got Botox, especially in this area, right? So like it was mostly between the eyes and here, forehead area. They would come back and say, I feel really, really good. And so he said, okay, well, you feel good, you look better, so of course you feel good. Like, no, I really, I've been really depressed and I feel better. So anyway, so he got in touch with the psychiatrist at Georgetown, and they ran just a pilot study. Long story short, is they ended up running a couple of major randomized control studies and getting a patent for it. And it's not a very widely known or utilized treatment for depression, but Botox in this area can help depression. And explanation is exactly the same thing. You cannot frown when you have Botox. If you ever had Botox, you can't frown, or you can't frown as much. And there's a feedback, right, to how we feel and think. And it is actually FDA approved treatment for depression, and they're trying to get approved, I think, for a couple of different anxiety disorders.
So Gary, any other questions?
No, I don't see any.
I would also just add, Dr. K, that one of the programs that I did some months ago was about laughter yoga. And that has become very popular. And it's not like the individual yoga, but people actually get together in groups, and they kind of form a circle and put their head on the stomach of the person next. And just that individual laughter, as well as feeling the person next to you laughing, is also very therapeutic in terms of generating laughter and making you feel better. As far as laughter is concerned, plus you're with a bunch of other people who are laughing, and you can't help but laugh yourself. So
because of course there's a contagion effect, right? Yes.
Exactly.
I love it. I love that. And a lot of us are so self-conscious as adults, right? And for somebody who hears that and thinks, oh my God, I could never do that. I always say, don't think about life in terms of all or nothing, right? Think about, okay, you can't do that, but maybe sometimes when you don't feel like smiling, smile. Like when I'm hiking in Rock Creek Park, I'll sometimes just make a point to just smile as I'm passing people on the other side, or say hi. And that will make me feel better. Sometimes makes them feel better. It's a whole chain of events that you unleash that way, right? And it's a behavior that you can control. You can do, like, as I said, just Mona Lisa, a smile or say hi, right? And you can make your day and their day better, right?
Well, I certainly understand. I grew up in the Midwest, and so we are particularly friendly. And sometimes I find walking down the street and I kind of surprise people by saying hello to them. It sort of takes them aback because they're usually on their phones or listening to a podcast or whatever. But if I say hello, it might actually make their day. So, and it makes me feel better as well. So, but well, it is 11:09, and so we really, Dr. K, thank you so much. You really touched on a lot of different issues about the holidays, and particularly important right now. There's a lot going on in our world, and then we have the holidays to boot. So to have you talk about the holiday blues and how you can, have less of the holiday blues is really important. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me today, and I wish everybody a good holiday season.